All right. Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at the Mehta Boys.
Oh, interesting.
This one is an Indian film, and it's critically acclaimed.
Right?
We've got a whole bunch of reviews and analyses, and I'm already seeing that it's not like a typical Bollywood movie.
Oh, how so?
Well, a lot of the reviews are talking about how subtle and realistic it is.
Huh, interesting. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, definitely not what I was expecting going into this, but that's what we're here for, to dive in.
Right, let's get into it. So this is directed by Boman Irani, and he's known for mostly comedic roles, and he's not just starring in it, he directed it.
Yeah, that's right. A double whammy. And it looks like The Mehta Boys is more than just like a typical tearjerker family drama,
Definitely.
because it's resonating with people for its really honest portrayal of family relationships.
For sure. Like, it's getting praise for how it shows real-life families. It's so complex, especially this father-son relationship that's strained by grief.
Yeah, that's tough. It's not like they just resolve everything quickly in the film, right?
Right. There's no, magical fix. It's really about these small moments, like gestures, smiles.
Like unspoken things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the unspoken stuff that really says a lot about relationships.
Absolutely. I feel like those little things say so much more sometimes.
Right. There's this one scene a reviewer mentioned where the father and son are just drinking tea together. No talking. Just this glance, this moment of understanding.
Wow, that's powerful. Like, silence can say so much in film.
Exactly. And you have to lean in as a viewer, pay attention to those cues. So we've got the father and son at the heart of it.
Yeah, the heart of the film. But I'm seeing a lot about the female characters, too. Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, they're not just there in the background. They have depth. Shreya Chaudhary, who plays Zara.
Yeah.
She's the son's love interest, but she's the pillar of strength. Very independent, like an anchor for him.
And there's Anu, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Played by Pooja Saraf. She's kind of the family mediator.
Trying to keep it all together.
It sounds like the film really gives those women space, like they have agency.
Yeah, that's always good to see. It makes the characters feel more real.
Right. And speaking of real, how about the visual style of the film?
Yeah, how was the cinematography?
Well, mixed reviews.
Oh.
Some said it's poetic. They loved how certain shots reflected what the characters were feeling. Yeah. Like there's this contrast between the huge Mumbai skyline and these characters who feel so small.
I see. So the visuals are symbolic.
Right, exactly. But some reviewers said that not all the scenes had that same flair.
Oh.
Yeah, they felt the focus was just capturing reality, not using visuals to make it more, moody.
Interesting. It sounds like Boman Irani, as a director, is really focusing on the actors, letting them, carry the story.
You got it. Maybe the cinematography is more understated, so we focus on the little interactions.
That makes sense. So what about the pacing? I saw something about that.
The pacing, especially in the second half, is interesting. The film uses silence a lot to let those emotions kind of be there.
So it's kind of a slow burn.
You could say that. But some reviewers felt it dragged a bit in places, that the tension wasn't always there.
So it might not be for everyone, but for people who like that quieter kind of storytelling, it could work.
Exactly. Oh, and there's one more thing about the father-son relationship.
Okay.
They're estranged, right. But we don't really know why.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, what happened in their past.
Some reviewers wanted to see more of that, like a flashback or something.
Right, more backstory.
But even with those critiques, everyone agrees that it's a powerful film.
Well, no film's perfect, right? It's all subjective.
True. And most reviewers gave it 4 out of 5 stars.
Okay, not bad, especially for a directorial debut.
Right. And before we move on, there's one more critique. Some people found the son, Amay, to be a bit inconsistent.
Inconsistent how?
Well, he has these outbursts of rage. Yeah, and they felt it didn't fit with the rest of the film,
Yeah.
The more quiet tone.
So even though the film is realistic, those outbursts felt a little too much.
Maybe, yeah. It's definitely something to keep in mind as we go deeper into the film. So speaking of going deeper.
Yeah, let's talk themes.
Right. So we've got grief, generational divides, and also this urban versus traditional identity thing going on.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack, especially in a family drama.
For sure. And grief is obviously central to the story. Both father and son are dealing with losing the mother.
And they probably cope with it in different ways, right? Maybe that plays into the generational divide.
Exactly. The father's more traditional, while the son is living this modern urban life. They clash.
It's like the film is reflecting what's happening in India, those societal shifts.
It's impressive how much they pack into this, a seemingly simple story. And The source material mentioned that if you like Piku or The Farewell,
Oh, yeah, I love those.
or even the works of Asghar Farhadi.
Asghar Farhadi, remind me.
He's an Iranian filmmaker.
Mm.
He does these very nuanced, emotionally complex dramas, a lot about family, morality, social class.
Oh, right, like a separation, right.
Yes, exactly. His films are known for being very subtle, and they make you think.
I remember that feeling, like the film stays with you. It's not about big action. It's about choices and how they affect people.
Exactly. So it seems like the Mehta Boys fits into that type of cinema.
It's definitely sounding like a must-watch, especially if you like those quieter, deeper films. Oh, but one thing. Boman Irani, the director. What did they mean by promising future behind the camera?
I think it's because he's telling a story that works on multiple levels, Yeah. It's not just a family drama. It's about grief, tradition, how India's changing.
And he does it subtly.
Right, the silences speak volumes.
Before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's get into those key takeaways from the source material.
Yes, let's see what they had to say about the Mehta Boys and why it's got people talking. So the source material highlighted how the film reflects on love and loss and, how complicated families can be, especially when they're dealing with grief and change,
Yeah, I saw that poignant reflection thing kept coming up in the reviews. But what exactly are they reflecting on? What are people thinking about after they watch it?
A lot of reviewers said it made them think about their own parents, how their relationship with them has changed over time.
Yeah, I get that. As you get older, you see your parents differently, right?
Right. You realize they're not perfect. They have their own issues.
And when there's loss, like in the film, it probably makes you reevaluate things even more.
Definitely. The mother's absence forces the father and son to, deal with stuff they haven't dealt with.
It makes me think of that question from our outline. How do our relationships with our parents evolve as we age, especially after loss? Heavy stuff.
Yeah, it really makes you think. And I think the Mehta Boys shows how grief can both hurt and help a family.
Right, it can bring you closer together, but also tear you apart.
Exactly. It's complex. And it makes you appreciate those relationships even more.
Yeah, because you realize they're not forever.
Right. But beyond the grief, there's also this thing about, how parental roles change as kids become adults.
Oh, yeah, I was noticing that too. That shift in power between the father and son.
It goes back to the generational divide too, right?
Totally. The father has those traditional expectations, but the son is living a totally different life.
And that causes friction, which happens in so many families.
It's you want to respect your parents, but also you have to be your own person.
And as you get older, it gets even more complicated. Maybe you become more friends with your parents.
But you're still family.
Exactly. And the film does a good job of showing that complexity.
It's the Mehta Boys is making us think about our own families. All those unspoken things that are there.
That's powerful stuff. Even with the flaws that some reviewers mentioned, like the pacing and tone.
Yeah, it sounds like those are minor compared to what the film achieves overall.
Right, exactly. It makes you think and feel and remember that connection is so important.
And it's Boman Irani's first time directing. That's pretty impressive.
For sure. Oh, and remember those notes for listeners? They said if you like Piku, The Farewell, or Asghar Farhadi.
We talked about those, but maybe we could go a little deeper. What connects those films to the Mehta Boys?
They're all about realism. The characters feel real and the stories are told in a realistic way. It's the little things,
The quiet moments.
Yeah, and they focus on family, but not in a perfect way.
They show the messiness.
Exactly. The Mehta Boys does that well, especially with the grief and conflict.
But there are also those sweet moments,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Yeah.
It's that balance that makes them feel so real. They're reflecting real life back at us.
And Boman Irani seems to get that.
He's not trying to make it easy for the audience. He's letting us figure things out ourselves.
So it's a film that you have to pay attention to, pick up on those little details.
Exactly. That's what makes it rewarding.
We've really uncovered a gem with this one. But before we wrap up, what about Boman Irani's future as a director?
Well, based on this film, he's got talent, right? He can tell a story, and he knows how to get good performances from actors.
I loved those quiet, intense moments. He did that so well.
Yeah, and he doesn't rely on dialogue all the time. That shows a lot of confidence in the audience.
Makes me excited to see what he does next.
Yeah.
But for now, let's focus on the Mehta Boys. I'm definitely adding it to my watch list.
Me too. It's a film that you just have to experience.
And for our listeners, if you like films that make you think and feel, this one's for you.
Don't forget to let us know what you think on social media.
We love hearing from you. But before we go, let's think about those evolving relationships and families. How do you deal with those changes?
Right. How do you balance respecting your parents with being yourself? How do you stay connected, even when it's hard?
Those are big questions.
And sometimes art helps us find the answers.
That's a good point. So go check out The Mehta Boys if you haven't. It's worth it.
It's a film that will stay with you. Until next time, keep exploring and diving deep.
You know, it's amazing how much this film, makes you think about your own life.
Right.
Like those generational divides. We talked about that, the whole tradition versus modern thing.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that's like different in other cultures.
Oh, for sure. What's traditional is different everywhere.
Exactly. So maybe what's a huge clash in one culture is like no big deal in another.
Interesting.
But even though The Mehta Boys is set in India, the themes like family, grief, those relationships, they feel universal.
Totally. Anyone can connect with that.
And that's the power of good storytelling.
Exactly. A specific story, but it speaks to everyone.
It makes me think about those parent-child roles we were talking about.
Yeah.
The film is about a father and son.
Right.
But I wonder, like, is it different between mothers and daughters?
Oh, that's interesting. I think so, yeah. There's something different about that mother-daughter bond.
Right. Like it's more emotional, maybe?
Traditionally, yeah. They share more experiences.
And then when you lose your mom,
it hits harder.
Maybe it changes like who you are even more.
That's deep.
It's like The Mehta Boys could be a whole different film, but with the same themes, just by changing those relationships.
Right. It shows how many stories you can tell.
Makes me wonder if Boman Irani will ever do a mother-daughter story.
Oh, I'd love to see that. He seems to get those family dynamics.
Me too. But for now, we've got The Mehta Boys, and it's given us a lot to think about.
It really has. I hope our listeners are feeling inspired.
To watch the film, for sure.
Yeah.
And to, like, share their thoughts with us.
Yes. Come chat with us on social media.
We love hearing from you. But before we go, let's go back to those evolving relationships and families.
Right. Those changing roles.
How do you deal with that in your own life? Like, how do you respect your parents, but also be yourself?
And how do you stay connected, even when things are tough?
Big questions, but important ones.
And sometimes art can help us figure it out.
I love that. So everyone, go check out The Mehta Boys. You won't regret it.
It's a film that will stay with you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep thinking, and keep diving deep.